Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty important tool to have available to you in order to do chemistry-related problems. And that tool that we'll talk about today is called dimensional analysis. In math, we know how to do things like add two numbers together or divide two numbers or multiply two numbers and then add another number to it. But in chemistry, we're not just dealing with numbers. We're basically always dealing with measurements. And measurements have both a number and a unit. And so what dimensional analysis allows us to do is to be able to do math on both the number and the unit. Okay? And we do dimensional analysis all the time. Another way to think about it is that dimensional analysis allows us to convert from one unit system to another. So basically, we have a measurement that's in one unit system. We use dimensional analysis to convert that measurement into a new unit system. And that's something that we do all the time, right? So a good example of that is if I told you that I went to the dryer to get my clothes out and I found 8 socks. Could you tell me how many pairs of socks I had? Well, yeah, you probably could do that pretty easily. You could say that there are 4 pairs of socks. Well, how did you get there? You actually did dimensional analysis in your head, okay? You asked a question. You asked, how many pairs are there in 8 socks? How many pairs are there in 8 socks? Well, in order to do that, we need some kind of what's called a conversion factor, some way to be able to convert from one unit system into another unit system. The thing that we know, the thing that we've agreed upon is this idea that 2 socks, or 2 of anything really, is equal to 1 pair. And so in your head, what you did is a mathematical expression where you asked how many pairs are equal to 8 socks, and then you multiplied this 8 socks by a conversion factor that had 1 pair in the numerator and had 2 socks in the denominator, okay? And so what that allows you to do, if you do this math, right, that would be 8 socks times 1 pair divided by 2 socks. Okay, that's what happens if I multiply this number by this fraction, right? Well, what do I see here? If I just think about the numbers, it's pretty straightforward. It's 8 times 1 divided by 2. 8 times 1 divided by 2 is equal to 4, right? So now, how did I get from socks to pairs? Well, look what happens here. I have the unit socks times the unit pair divided by the unit socks. Anytime you have the same unit in both the numerator and the denominator, those 2 units cancel. Okay? And so now the only unit that we have left is pair. So 8 socks is equal to 4 pairs. Well, we know that because of this really important conversion factor that allowed me to cancel out the unit socks and be left with the unit pair. Okay? Let's try another one. What if I told you I had 3.5 dozen eggs? Okay. Could you tell me how many eggs that I had? Well, you might be able to do that in your head, but this again is dimensional analysis. So the question that we want to ask is, how many eggs are there in 3.5 dozen? Okay? And so in order to answer this question, we again need to know some kind of conversion factor. We are again going to multiply this number by a fraction. And that fraction is going to be our conversion factor. This fact that we know that relates these two different unit systems, dozens and number and eggs, right? Well, we all know that 1 dozen is equal to 12 eggs, right? We've just agreed that there are 12 in a dozen, right? Well, we can use this idea, this fact, in order to allow us to convert from dozen to the number of eggs, okay? So we're going to turn this equality into a conversion factor. And the way that we're going to do that is to take this and put it into this fraction. Now the trick here is to make sure that we put it into a fraction in the right way. Remember, we're trying to cancel out this unit and be left with the unit that we want, right? So if I want to convert from dozen to eggs, I'm going to make my fraction have the unit dozen in the denominator. So I'm going to say 1 dozen is equal to 12 eggs, right? And again, why did I do that, right? Because if I do this multiplication, I know that it's going to be 3.5 dozen times 12 eggs divided by 1 dozen, right? So it's 3.5 times 12 divided by 1 dozen. Well, I can do that math, and now let's do it on our calculator. All right, so we're going to say 3.5 dozen times 12 divided by 1. Well, of course, that's 42, okay? So that equals 42, and now I've got dozen times eggs divided by dozen. Remember, if I have a unit that's in both the numerator and the denominator, those two units cancel. So the only unit that I'm left with is eggs. Okay? So again, dimensional analysis is allowing us to convert from one unit system into another unit system. Let me erase this and then we'll try one more. Right, this time let's try one that's a little bit harder. Let's imagine that we are taking a trip, and we're taking a trip, it's going to be a 340-mile trip, okay? And what we want to know is how much are we going to spend in gas as we make this 340-mile trip? So the question that we're going to be asking here is how many US dollars, how much money are we going to spend in order to go 340 miles? Okay. This is a question that you might have posed to yourself before. And if you calculated the answer, you did so using dimensional analysis, right? And so in order to get from miles to dollars, we're going to need a couple of conversion factors, right? We're going to need a couple of equalities that we can use to get from the unit system of miles to the unit system of dollars, right? The first thing that we're going to need to know is how many miles can our car drive on 1 gallon of gas, okay? Let's say we have an okay car that gets okay gas efficiency, and let's say that it gets 26 miles in 1 gallon, okay? So if I burn 1 gallon of gasoline, my car can take me 26 miles, right? All right, and now we need one other conversion factor. We need to know what's the average amount of money that we're going to spend at the gas station on our trip, okay? Let's keep it a little bit simple, and we'll say that 1 gallon of gas is equal to $3, okay? basically where we go on our trip, we'll always spend about $3 per every 1 gallon of gasoline. All right? Okay, well, I'm going to rewrite this because I think it's going to take a little bit of space here. So remember, our question is, how many dollars are equal to 340 miles? Okay. Well, our goal here is to get to the unit of dollars. Okay. And if we look at our facts over here, our equalities, our potential conversion factors, we see there's a pretty easy pathway. We can convert from dollars to gallons and from gallons to miles, right? And that's where we're trying to get to is dollars, where we're starting with is miles. So actually we want to do that in the reverse. We want to be able to convert from miles to gallons and then from gallons to dollars, all right? So let's give that a try. Our first step is to convert from miles to gallons. So we're going to multiply by a conversion factor that uses this equality, okay? And that equality, again, is to say that we can go 26 miles on 1 gallon of gas, okay? And look what's going to happen when we do this multiplication, right? 340 times 1 divided by 26. Okay, we can do that math. But look what happens to the units. It's miles times gallons divided by miles. Miles is going to be in both the numerator and the denominator of our final fraction here. And remember, if you have units that are in both the numerator and the denominator, those units cancel. So right now, the only unit that I have left is gallons. I've converted miles into gallons, right? My next step is to convert from gallons to dollars. And the way that I can do that is to say that for every 1 gallon of gas, it will cost me $3, okay? Now, when I do this math here, I've got 340 times 1 divided by 26 times 3 divided by 1, right? I've already canceled out miles. I've already found that it's in both the numerator and the denominator. And now what I see is that gallons is now in both the numerator and the denominator. Remember, if units are in both the numerator and the denominator, those units cancel. And now the only unit that I have left is US dollars, okay? So now it's just a matter of doing the math. It's 340 times 1 divided by 26 times 3 divided by 1. Let's do that math on our calculator. So we've got 340 times 1, then divided by 26, and then times $3, okay? And then again divided by 1. So the answer here is that this trip, this 340-mile trip, is going to cost us $39.23, okay? And we got there by doing dimensional analysis. Now, something to keep in mind, remember that the point of dimensional analysis is to find equalities that you can use as conversion factors. Those conversion factors allow you to convert from one unit system into another unit system by multiplying your original unit by some fraction. And that fraction allows you to cancel out the units that you're trying to get rid of and keep the units that you're trying to get to. That's dimensional analysis in a nutshell. I hope this video was helpful. I'll see you next time.